This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. You could be watching anything right now, but we're glad you're here, even if I'm like white noise or background sound for y'all. Anyway, here's what we got for y'all. Ports are dealing with a backlog of cargo ships as shortages continue during the pandemic, but shortages at those ports are also causing problems. And while Spanish is the second most spoken language in the country, some Hispanic communities in the US didn't always push younger generations to learn it. We look into the impacts of language discrimination. But first, let's put a spotlight on what's holding up a helpful tool in fighting the pandemic. If you look around, things largely seem to be getting back to normal, or some sense of normalcy. Concerts and music festivals are back, marathons are being ran, and getting reservations for a large party at a restaurant is no longer impossible. But even as we get back to some of the things we used to do, the pandemic is still very much happening. The daily death toll is just as high as it was a year ago. Vaccines are one tool in this ongoing fight. Then there's another tool that offers an alternative for vaccine mandates: widespread rapid testing for the virus. But as a Newsy investigation found out, the nation lacks enough rapid tests for homes, schools, and workplaces. And that doesn't have to be the case. Newsy's Patrick Terpstra has been reporting on issues with testing since the early days of the pandemic. He explains how, even as vaccine production and approval was fast-tracked, the authorization of rapid tests is stuck in the slow lane.
Our dream is to someday maybe see one of these in pharmacies.
Cesar de la Fuente at the University of Pennsylvania shows us an affordable rapid COVID test he built more than a year ago.
You could monitor almost in real time your, in this case, COVID-19 status, throughout the day.
A swab from the mouth or nose transforms into an electrical signal for analysis by a machine that can be made small enough to plug into your phone.
And then your results are provided by this app.
It's been peer-reviewed and published, shown to be 87% accurate at detecting positive COVID cases, but it can't be sold yet. When the professor applied for FDA approval, the agency said it needed more research and experiments.
Did you think, oh boy?
It was more like the oh boy response. I thought, okay, we're gonna need to hire more people to help us do all this stuff. I don't really have the personnel to take on that right now.
We found the FDA is keeping in place guidelines that are preventing low-cost over-the-counter antigen tests from flooding the market, even as President Biden tries to end a shortage of rapid tests.
America has failed to do enough COVID-19 testing.
There are two ways to look at home tests. The FDA sees them as a medical device for one person, just like every other COVID test, requiring a high level of precision and lots of evidence to back them up. It's a focus on quality over quantity. The other approach, embraced overseas with a different system of regulating medicine, is to lower the bar, allowing stores to sell a bounty of tests, keeping them affordable enough for the whole family to take every day before heading out to work or school. The idea is, even if some are not as accurate, they're so fast.
In 4 minutes with this prototype, you will get your result.
You can test often enough to catch an error in less time than the days it might take for results from a gold standard lab test.
So even if it's not perfect, the advantage of repeating over time makes it just as effective.
Congresswoman and pediatrician Kim Schreier has been pressing the FDA to clear more at-home tests, seeing them as a simple tool for preventing community spread.
This is not the test that decides whether you go into the hospital or not, or which antibiotic you get, or antiviral in this case. This is the test that tells you, hey, today's the day to stay home.
The FDA has so far approved 7 at-home over-the-counter rapid tests. Compare that to 34 self-tests on the market in Germany. The FDA wouldn't tell us how many similar products are out there like De La Fuente's, with applications for approval still pending. We found 5, including another smartphone-based home test from Exa Health. They built more than 1 million tests with plans to sell 30 million a month. They struck a deal to sell them in 2,200 Kroger stores, but they've been working with the FDA to get authorized for more than a year now. Kroger has not been able to sell any of the tests. The FDA says it has prioritized rapid tests for review among the heap of COVID-related products needing FDA emergency use authorization, from experimental treatments to vaccines. In response to our questions, the FDA sent us a statement saying, "We recognize the critical purpose these tests serve and that it carefully weighs the known and potential risks and known and potential benefits." Agency documents note special consideration for home tests, where a person must collect their specimen, run the test, and interpret their results accurately.
For at-home tests, that bar has always been a little bit higher. People are making decisions based on these tests, and they can be consequential for the people around them.
The company Illume just recalled a batch of at-home kits in the U.S. for higher than expected false positives. Congresswoman Schreier says the FDA should at least run a head-to-head review of the dozens of rapid tests found around the world that do not have FDA authorization. The agency said no, saying it focuses only on those products that apply for approval.
It sure would be nice if we could buy some of those tests, having evaluated them, so that we would have this capacity and this tool that so many other countries already have.
Back at the University of Pennsylvania, De La Fuente says he understands the FDA's caution, even though it's keeping his test in his lab instead of on store shelves.
We have to follow the rules, and the FDA has certain guidelines and processes that are in place for a reason.
He and his team have since invented 2 other rapid COVID tests.
This is the second prototype.
One using graphite from pencils, and another test in the works he says will cost just 15 cents. A cotton swab that changes color to indicate a COVID infection.
The way I like to think about it is kind of like a pregnancy test, but for COVID.
Even if the FDA gave De La Fuente the green light for his test tomorrow, there are still other challenges he would have getting them to market. He would need someone to make his kits by the million. He can't seek a manufacturer until the FDA gives the okay.
It's just a bit frustrating to see that there is a lack. We know that they're an incredible tool for prevention.
The White House just announced new steps to surge production of rapid at-home tests, including a plan to buy $1 billion worth to quadruple supply by December, but only the tests that have passed the FDA's high standards. I'm Patrick Terpstra reporting in Philadelphia.
Much appreciated, Patrick. From COVID tests to COVID vaccines, people are really lining up to get the COVID-19 booster shots. On average, 362,000 people a day for the last week got that other dose. Health experts are still on the fence about whether booster shots are the move going forward, since there's still a significant chunk of the population who is unvaccinated. According to the numbers from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, just over 56% of the US population has been fully vaccinated. As the nation's top doctors have noted time and time again, the more chances we give for the virus to spread, especially among those who have no protection against it, the more opportunities we give for variants to arise. We've heard from pastors, trusted leaders, and community groups all urging people to get vaccinated. The thing is, appealing to those people who choose not to get a COVID-19 vaccine has proven extremely tough. As Matt Pearl shows us, individuals and families are now reaching out in the face of their own tragedies to share their stories in hopes of getting through to some of those holdouts.
They don't want to be here.
How are you both doing?
Yeah, we're feeling all right today. Yeah.
Victor and Jackie Frazier don't want to be looking into a camera, pleading with anyone who will listen to get vaccinated for COVID-19.
Once you get into the fight with this demon, it's too late.
They're only here because Barbara isn't.
She was just a fighter for other people, and unfortunately, she made her opinion a decision to neglect her own, care.
Barbara Frazier had begun to blossom. Her parents speak of awards she won at work, the pride she made them feel. But when the COVID vaccine reached their small southern town, Victor and Jackie couldn't convince their daughter to get it. Then she got the virus.
She did not trust the medical field or the scientists either. Me and my wife both were vaccinated, and when we were trying to help our daughter, we both caught COVID, and I caught COVID pneumonia.
Victor and Jackie spent time in the hospital but eventually recovered. Barbara died in her sleep at the age of 29.
It's like something being snatched out of you. It's
so unreal,
Yeah, it's like you're in a dream, and it's not registered. Nothing's really registered,
Within weeks of losing their daughter, Victor and Jackie committed to sharing her story, in part because they knew she wasn't alone. They know of so many people who look like them.
Me and you got each other. See, we put your mask on.
Who don't wear masks and won't get the vaccine. Dr. Catherine Burley sees it too.
Well, there's fear. You know, they don't have a lot of trust.
She also sees how decades of conscious and subconscious bias in medical health has impacted her community.
You know, they go to the doctor and they're treated differently, they're talked to differently. A lot of times, sometimes they just want to hear me say, you need to get the vaccine.
But to pinpoint one group for vaccine hesitancy is to miss the vast diversity of mass resistance. A study from the COVID States Project found it's not just black parents, but rural parents, young parents, and low-income parents who are more likely to have concerns. And a CDC survey found the states with the most hesitant populations include Montana and Wyoming, Kentucky and Arkansas. So many have lost. So many are speaking out.
I wasn't gonna get the vaccine, but then I got sick.
This is John Painter. He recorded a video with the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau to help convince fellow farmers to get vaccinated.
If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for the people that love you.
As a fourth wave of the virus fills hospitals again, a new wave of appeals seeks to convince those not yet reached.
I mean, there's not a week that goes by that I'm not getting a call from the medical examiner, the hospital, or a family member about one of my patients who's perished from COVID. It's very real. You know, and some of these people were fine 2 months ago, and they're now deceased.
Victor and Jackie saw it with Barbara. Now, amidst their grief, because of their grief, they look into a camera and speak.
When you go to the emergency room, you see a lot of black people, you know, standing there waiting for hours and hours and hours. Something got to scratch that surface and let them know that, you know, they have to be prepared. This is not no play. This is a killer.
I know that she loved us dearly, and she knows we loved her. I just want people to know that you want to do something while you can.
In Warner Robins, Georgia, I'm Matt Pearl.
After the break, we're talking about what's trending on social media, from an impending strike in Hollywood to a sit-in at a DC university. And we are back. If you are a little obsessed with how Steve Harvey's been dressing lately, I completely understand. He's been posting fits on his social media platforms, and here's what I'll say. Hate if you want, but that's a 64-year-old man still going for it. Now that that's out of the way, we're gonna turn our attention to non-sartorial trending topics. Here's what we got. Students at Howard University have spent several days this week occupying an on-campus student center as a part of a protest over living conditions. They want the administration at one of the largest HBCUs in the country to address a student housing shortage, clean up dorms with mold and leaks, provide more COVID testing, and give students more of a say in decisions by the school's board of trustees and on tuition prices. The university has threatened to discipline and potentially expel students involved in the protests. And this isn't the first time Howard students have staged an on-campus sit-in. In 2018, students sat in a building for 9 days after it became public that university employees had stolen money from the school's financial aid department. You may not be familiar with the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, but 60,000 of their members are set to go on strike Monday if a deal isn't reached with a group of leading production companies. The strike could bring film and TV productions across the country to a halt as union members seek better working conditions. Newsy's Phil Lavelle has more from LA.
Yeah, and that's the key point here, Christian. We're talking nationwide, because when we refer to Hollywood, we don't mean the place, we mean the industry. Now that includes LA, obviously, but also places like New York, Atlanta, and other locations across the country that have film and television production industries. Now what you've got here are two sides. You've got the union that you just referenced, and you've also got the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. Now every 3 years they renegotiate an agreement, and that was due to be renegotiated this summer. But the union said, well, hang on a a second. Our members have been through a pandemic. They're in a difficult place. The streaming services have transformed the landscape. This needs to be looked at in real detail. And they've been talking for months. Now the union is saying, you know, we've talked for far too long. We're hitting that point where we are going to hit that metaphorical red button, the nuclear option. If we do not have a contract with us by the weekend, then our members on Monday morning will walk out. That includes all aspects of production. That includes lighting, sound, the technical aspects, makeup, wardrobe, those crew members that you don't see but are essential. So understandably, this is a hugely massive issue, a very tense situation here in the entertainment industry. And we're going to be watching this one very closely in the coming hours and the coming days. Christian, back to you.
Key U.S. ports in Southern California are facing near-record backlogs of cargo ships. This has caused a shortage of grocery supplies and an increase in prices. President Biden announced this week that the Port of Los Angeles would join the Port of Long Beach in running 24/7 to help alleviate the supply chain slowdown. And now the ports are trying to adapt to help close the gap on the shortage. National reporter Thomas Hoppaugh has more.
We're in the middle of navigating through the largest cargo surge in our history.
So they're just accumulating there at the port, not getting out of the ones that are on the land, and the rest are out on the water, floating around in ships, waiting to unload into the port.
This is the Port of Long Beach, California. And this port, along with the Port of Los Angeles, faces a near-record backlog of cargo ships. The port says it handled 17 million shipping containers pre-pandemic. This year, it is on track to handle 20 million. The problem is there aren't enough workers or truck drivers to meet the demand.
My name is Noel Hasagaba. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at the Port of Long Beach. Even before COVID, there was a truck driver shortage. The pandemic has exacerbated that shortage. And then on top of that, we have this record surge. So every segment of the supply chain is stressed and overwhelmed. We are America's gateway. 40% of America's waterborne imports come in through this gateway each year. And the containers that cross our docks each day touch every single one of the 435 congressional districts. So this issue here is truly an issue of national significance.
This issue has touched every corner of the supply chain. One that's of concern for a lot of consumers are grocery stores.
At least 15 to 20% of all the containers that we process include contents that would be deemed perishable.
We're seeing some things that would be on the grocery shelves not there. So we see empty shelves of things that are goods that are produced in the Asian countries, especially when we're talking about these two ports. So they're not getting to the grocers, so they're not on the shelf.
This is what you will see in grocery stores today. And according to economist Matt Klaus, the backlog of cargo ships is causing prices to go up.
The law of supply and demand says that if there's a decrease in the supply and the demand is still there, then the market price is going to go up to clear the market. We've seen inflation at around 5%. And so the consumers are feeling it in their pocketbooks.
According to Goldman Sachs, supply-constrained goods account for 80% of this year's inflation. In order to try and close the gap on this issue, the Port of Long Beach has made grocery containers a priority.
We work very closely with our terminal operators to prioritize medical supplies, PPE, perishable goods. It could be food items, for example. We've taken a number of actions to address the congestion here at the port. We activated 65 acres of vacant land. We made it available to provide immediate relief to our terminals.
But it has also turned one of its terminals into a 24-hour operation.
This is the first time that any terminal in America is operating 24 hours a day. Given the magnitude of this cargo surge and given the congestion across the supply chain, we think it's time that the U.S. supply chain take a serious look at what we need to do to transition to a 24/7 operation.
I'm Thomas Hoppaugh reporting.
When you're back, we'll talk a bit about our climate crisis and how fracking plays into that equation. See you on the other side.
What if the news was different and covered more than one side of the story?
Justice wasn't served.
So you can make up your own mind.
I love this so much.
Introducing the new point of view. yours. Newsy. Watch free 24-hour news.
Fracking is a major way we get our energy through oil or gas, and it's highly controversial, just to put it lightly. Supporters have said it's good for the economy. The US is currently the world's largest oil and gas producer, and a ban could force the US to become a net importer again. That could be a security concern and could potentially raise prices in electricity costs and gasoline. Opponents have said it's horrible for the environment since it releases tons of methane, a greenhouse gas far more powerful than CO2. The spike in methane in our atmosphere seems to be linked to the fracking boom. Some of the atmospheric gases even had chemical fingerprints, linking it to fracking in the United States specifically. The thing is, there's still a lot we don't know about the extent of methane's harm. So, national reporter Dan Grossman spoke with researchers who are investigating the role of methane in the climate crisis, a crucial point in the debate over whether we can continue fracking.
It's travel day, and Phil Stratton is getting ready to fly 8 hours from Colorado to Chicago to DC. It's a long journey with a lot of precious cargo. No, not this stuff.
So on the top, we are measuring nitrogen dioxide, NO2, a criteria pollutant with the EPA.
The data gathered from using this stuff.
It uses cavity attenuated phase shift, so it has a laser in the back, and it sends out a very regulated square pulse wave.
We don't need to tell you Phil is smart.
So this is an instrument called a proton transfer reaction mass spectrometer.
Same with his colleague, Abigail Koss, who is also working to, in layman's terms, understand how much harmful gas is being emitted from fracking sites nationwide.
We think of using natural gas as a bridge fuel. So what that means is it's a cleaner burning type of fossil fuel, so we can move away from dirtier fuels like coal, for instance.
We all know about CO2, but another major greenhouse gas affecting climate change is methane. It can come from a multitude of sources: landfills, livestock, land use, and fracking, and that can make it hard to trace. Enter Phil, Abigail, and their equipment. Among other compounds, it works to detect ethane, a short-lived gas only emitted along with methane when that methane comes from fracking.
Being able to delineate this in real time with fast measurements on the order of 1 second is really important.
Alan Freed is a senior researcher at the University of Colorado and is heading the research. He says by measuring methane from fracking and other greenhouse gases, we can learn more about fracking's impact on our atmosphere and adjust the practice accordingly, as the data collected will be sent to local health departments.
It's important to our immediate health. I know there's major concerns about what we're breathing from fracking operations, and they're still trying to study some of the long-term effects of some of the emissions. Even if you're relatively healthy, going out and exercising on a high pollution day where there's a lot of precursors that produce ozone could be detrimental.
This is all done as we move away from coal and toward cleaner energy sources. Natural gas produces around 50% fewer emissions than coal. But Alan and his team hope to reduce that even further once they get this data back to DC. I'm Dan Grossman.
After the break, we're moving from advancements in climate science to advancements in medicine. Specifically, as we wrap up Hispanic Heritage Month, we're taking a look at the historic contributions of Hispanic Americans in health. We are still in the middle of a global pandemic, and advancements in medicine have been a big part of the journey. From testing to vaccines, it's taken a global scientific effort to figure out this virus and its variants, and then come up with the tools to fight it. Now, since September 15th, we've been bringing you stories about Hispanic heritage and culture in a month-long run that's dedicated to it. As Hispanic Heritage Month wraps up, it's worth spotlighting some major contributions Hispanic Americans have made to medicine. For example, in the 1800s, Dr. Carlos Juan Finlay noticed a correlation between the increase of the mosquito population and yellow fever. There were outbreaks across the US, and in his home country of Cuba. His research helped reduce yellow fever cases during the Spanish-American War. Dr. Finlay presented the ideas that bugs can carry diseases, and at first he was laughed at, but joke's on them because as we now know, these vector-borne diseases, aka viruses spread by bugs, account for more than 17% of all infectious diseases, according to the WHO. Then there's history still in the making. Serena Onion Chancellor is the first Hispanic physician to travel to space. When she's in space, she's working on experiments related to Parkinson's disease and cancer. Yeah, she's a doctor and an astronaut. She's doing a lot. During the pandemic, she went from space to the COVID wards. She's currently teaching at LSU Health New Orleans School of Medicine, and she's been working with her residents on the COVID floor of the hospital. As we've seen over the last year and a half, COVID has highlighted many healthcare disparities in minority communities. CDC data shows that Hispanic Americans are at a higher risk for catching the virus because many of them are frontline workers who cannot work from home, and they're more likely to live in multi-generational households, making it harder to spread out and socially distance. Hispanic Americans currently make up 27% of COVID cases in the US, but they only account for about 18% of the population. Jane Delgado has been battling racial inequities in healthcare throughout her entire career. She made key contributions in promoting minority health at the Department of Health and Human Services. She's the president of the National Alliance for Hispanic Health and the first woman to hold the position. While many Hispanic Americans have made monumental contributions to the medical field, they still face disparities in healthcare, and there's a lot of room for improvement on that front. Here with us to talk a bit more about health in the Hispanic community is Jane Delgado. She's the president and CEO of the National Alliance for Hispanic Health. Jane, thank you so much for joining us on ITL. First question, what led you to a career in advocating for equality in healthcare?
Well, you know, it's interesting because early on when I was going for my PhD in clinical psychology, I realized that while one-to-one therapy is essential, that you really had to change institutions. And that is one of the things that I had like 1 year left to fellowship. I talked to my advisor. He sent me to talk to someone, Ed Ziegler up at Yale, who said, you need to be involved in public policy. You need to get a degree in public policy also. So when I graduated, I had a PhD in clinical psych and a PhD and an MS in urban policy sciences, because I knew that we had to change institutions because the very people I wanted to serve were not getting the services that they needed.
We love a good origin story here, especially from a person as learned as you. I'm curious to know, I guess from your perspective, what is the importance of being an advocate for the Hispanic community when it comes to their health?
Well, actually for us, remember that 6 years ago, we changed our mission from improving the health and well-being of Hispanics to best health for all. We need to use the Hispanic experience, not just to improve health for us, but really to change the health enterprise, because as it is, it was not serving people.
I'm curious to know, what is what is unique about the Hispanic experience when it comes to health of these communities, and why was it so important for you all to kind of expand the scope of what it is that you were doing from the Hispanic community to, best health care for all?
Well, part of it is as part of the Hispanic community, we know that we are connected to people throughout the hemisphere. So really all people need better health. And much of what is true for our health can be applied to learn more about health for all people. For example, Hispanics have low income. They have all sorts of risk factors from excess weight to lack of health insurance. So I think there are lessons to be learned, and how do we apply them to everyone?
We've been looking at contributions to medicine from Hispanic Americans, and I just want to hear from you on this. Why is it so important to have these diverse perspectives in the medical field?
Because the medical field has been driven by data from non-Hispanic white males. So a lot of the models that we have for health now are models that stigmatize the very people we need to be serving. And that all includes Hispanics, African Americans, Asians, Native Americans, women, low-income people, and LGBTQ, and a whole bunch of other people, disabled people that we have left out of our system. Yes, we're not all the same. And thank goodness. We'd be very boring if we were all the same. But we have to take that diversity as the richness and the data points to enhance the decisions we make in health. Without it, we are lost.
Jane Delgado making it plain on ITL, the president and CEO of the National Alliance for Hispanic Health. Thank you so much for your time, Jane. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Another major part of Hispanic culture is, of course, the Spanish language. But while some people grew up with their parents speaking it at home, they themselves aren't fluent. This could lead to discrimination from other Spanish speakers and leave them feeling isolated. National reporter Gina Arevalo breaks down the history behind why this is so common and what some people are doing about it.
In the state of Texas, El Paso and Spanish go hand in hand.
¿Hay alguna pregunta que quieran hacer de un tema?
It's not uncommon to hear Spanish spoken at the grocery store, restaurants, or even on the job.
¿Qué tal? ¿Qué hay de nuevo?
For this group of adults living on the U.S.-Mexico border, Spanish is what connects them to their culture.
I am Mexican-American. I'm Chicana, Mexican-American.
And to each other.
My parents both spoke Spanish.
I grew up with my grandma speaking nothing but Spanish to me.
They have something else in common, but they wish they didn't.
The first question is, do you speak Spanish? Not really. When I'm expected to speak Spanish, I do feel like a deer in the headlights. I get paralyzed, I stop.
Although their parents and grandparents are fluent in Spanish, they aren't.
In the home, it was mainly English.
Data collected by the Census Bureau shows 73% of Latinos spoke Spanish at home in 2015. The number dropped from 78% back in 2006.
¿Y tú eres el padrino de tu bisnieto?
Reasons behind this may vary, but for some, it goes back decades, as Devin Lara learned from her grandmother.
It was looked down upon in the United States when they were growing up, so they were often punished in school for speaking Spanish.
A 1972 report by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights showed about a third of schools surveyed in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and California had a no Spanish rule in the classroom.
I think in its best form, that kind of state intervention was an attempt to try to normalize everybody. But I think in its worst form, it was a different form of discrimination. You had families that were emphasizing this and were telling their kids, you know, this will mark you as different, so we don't want you to mark yourself.
Tronos, los tronos.
Decades later, people like Bethany Rivera Molinar are facing a new type of criticism.
I would be chastised and called out as a kid, like, all the way into adulthood. Like, don't you care about your culture? Like, you don't speak Spanish. You're not really Mexican.
How does that feel?
Oh my gosh, like isolating. It's very shameful.
It definitely stings a bit, and you start to question, yourself, and you're like, oh, am I Latina enough?
But they're trying to turn things around. They're taking Spanish classes with the hope of passing it down to future generations and breaking down the language barrier for good.
If I can get them to learn it is very important, because now they have more people they can help, the more people they can impact. Their doors aren't so limited as my doors were.
In El Paso, I'm Gina Arevalo.
We're going to bring you a sneak peek of a brand new episode of our documentary series, In Real Life. Don't go anywhere. When you're back, we're talking about dark skies. It's less spooky than you're probably thinking, trust me. Welcome back, folks, and thanks for sticking around. Our new Newsy documentary series, In Real Life, has taken us to some interesting places. From the forefront of new American infrastructure meant to tackle water-related climate risks, to an unconventional TikTok creator house. In this week's episode, we're focusing our attention on our relationship with light. In big cities, we are surrounded by an excess of it, also known as light pollution. And that can affect everything from our health and our ecosystem to whether we can see the stars above our heads. But there are communities around the world working to preserve darkness, like the one we're about to show you. Here's a clip from the Dark Skies episode of In Real Life.
If you think about Crestone, you can just remember that we have plenty of nothing, and we're located at the end of a road that goes nowhere.
Crestone became officially recognized as an international dark sky community in May of 2021, meaning that as a community, they are devoted to having as little light pollution as possible. And what better way to celebrate than a festival on the full moon? What can you tell me about Crestone? What's this place like?
We not only have a dark sky, Crestone is the second most quiet place in the country.
So it's a dark and quiet place, Crestone
And both
is.
of those things, they say, are very good for the natural biorhythms of the body. So it's a place of peace and quiet and darkness.
What are some of the things you have to do to be certified as a dark sky community?
Clearly, you have to pass an ordinance that is extremely restrictive, it having to do with hours, having to do with how much light you can have, having to do with pointing your lights downward. It has to do with completely eliminating any light pollution.
I was gonna ask, what makes Crestone, such a ripe location to be a dark sky community?
The elevation, it's quite high here. The second reason is that we have a very low humidity. And the third reason is simply because we're located a long ways away from Colorado's major population centers. So the three of those things together give us the ability to have very clear views of the sky.
All right, folks, you just watched a clip from the Dark Skies episode of In Real Life. Now, as you might have seen, I did some reporting on this story, and usually we reserve this space for a talk back with the reporter. I'm not going to talk to myself because that would be a little weird, but I am going to talk to one of my colleagues who served as the producer on the story. She is a Newsy docs producer here with us to talk a little bit about Dark Skies, is producer Alexandra Travis. Alex, what's up?
Hi, Christian. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being with us on ITL. It's good to be able to kind of debrief Dark Skies with you. One of the first things I wanted to know is, what was the impetus for this story? What is it that interested you and piqued your interest?
It all started with reading a story from The Bitter Southerner, which was a great magazine. And they did a story about the darkest place east of the Mississippi River. And it was in my home state of Georgia, like just an hour or so away from where I went to college. So that kind of sparked my interest in like these communities that are dedicated to having lighting ordinances and keeping their communities dark for a variety of different reasons.
This is a story that took us from Washington, D.C., where we live and work, to Boulder, Colorado, and then to Crestone, Colorado. Was there anything that was left on the cutting room floor that you felt was something worth sharing or something worth kind of talking about for our audience? There was a lot that we filmed for this, but not everything made it in.
I think something that really caught my attention, especially when we spent time in Boulder with Nancy Clanton and her lighting specialist, the things that we talked about that the audience didn't get to see, like how much public opinion is considered when they're going into these cities and parks or wherever and redesigning the light, how much they consult with the people around there to make sure that they feel comfortable with the lighting situations before it's changed. And I think that's so important going forward with other cities making these changes. And something related to that is just that safety isn't necessarily guaranteed just because there's a lot of light.
I'm glad that you mentioned Nancy Clanton, though. You might not see much of it in the piece, but she also has a cape that says Dark Sky Protector. When I see somebody that has a cape that says Dark Sky Protector, I'm pretty sure I'm like, okay, that's a professional. That's somebody I trust. The last thing I want to know, Alex, is that in doing this story, have you changed any of your habits when it comes to lighting?
I think it has definitely made me think about it more, especially with lighting that actually isn't in my control, like on my block and things like that, and lights coming from other people's houses. I think I've definitely dedicated to keeping all my blinds shut when I need to be, not letting in any additional light, especially in the bedroom where I can help it, so my melatonin production isn't thrown off. The color temperature, it's made me think a lot about that. Thankfully, in my apartment, I don't know if you can tell, but the lighting's pretty warm, so that's a good thing.
I want to make sure I thank you for bringing me aboard for this particular story and taking me from DC to Colorado. Newsy's Alexandra Travis, she was the producer for Dark Skies, the upcoming episode of In Real Life. Alexandra, thank you so much.
Thank you, Christian.
Many thanks to Alexandra Travis, who is the brains of that operation. You can catch that episode of In Real Life Sunday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern here on Newsy. If you want to show her some love or just yell at me about why we don't have an extended cut of that little boy riding two dogs at the same time like a seasoned cowboy, go ahead and hit us up. #NewsyInTheLoop. That's how you can get in touch with us. We're ready to shut this thing down, but not before taking one more lap on our top stories of the day. We're closing the loop when you're back. Our time together is almost over until tomorrow, but if you are just now tuning in, let me loop you in on our top stories. The video game industry is the biggest entertainment industry by revenue in the world, and it's continuing to grow, which means it's increasingly running up against the threat of regulation. In the US, video game regulation efforts came to a head in the 90s when lawmakers fretted that violent video games could affect the behavior of children that played them. Although violent content is less of a target these days, lawmakers are still expressing fears about the behavioral impacts of video games, specifically what happens when people play too much of them. The actual research and the harmful effects of prolonged game use is inconclusive at best, but the proposed solutions, government-imposed limits on game time, might not be the best way to tackle these problems.
It's coming from the perspective that games impact people in a uniform way. But we know that that's not the case. Some people use games differently, some use them problematically, some have a harder time regulating than others. So having kind of just a hard and fast rule across the board is ineffective.
Facing scrutiny over the years, video games have gotten better at self-regulating. Video games regulation is still very much in flux around the world. China's recent clampdown on excessive gaming is one fairly extreme example of how countries are reaching different conclusions about how video games should be controlled. Research says many women with ADHD go well into adulthood without ever being diagnosed. That kind of missed diagnosis can lead to some pretty serious outcomes in adulthood, and it all largely stems from some misconceptions around ADHD in young boys and girls. And it's the perfect time to talk about it since it's ADHD Awareness Month. Boys with ADHD typically get diagnosed around 7 years old when they're hyperactive and maybe being disruptive in class or something. And historically, white boys were the demographic most likely to be diagnosed. But symptoms of ADHD in girls tend to look a lot different. Girls with ADHD are more likely to be inattentive, easily distracted, and lost in their thoughts rather than hyperactive.
What we're finding is that the outcomes, especially for women who do have impulsivity, are extremely negative and much more negative than boys and men. So we're finding that they are 5 times more likely to self-harm.
Okay, folks, that's all we have for tonight. But don't worry, we'll be back tomorrow with more In the Loop. Stay with us. Evening Debrief is up next.